Can you hear me fine? Yeah. Okay, good afternoon. And if you came in here late and you haven't had lunch, there's extra lunch there. But thank you. I really want to thank you and the organizing committee for inviting me here today. I will be talking today about geo, but actually it's a different type of geo that we have heard about this morning. And it is about geotechnical engineering. I'm often asked on plane, what does a geotechnical engineer do? I'm a civil engineer. I said, well, structural engineer, think about it ground up, geotechnical engineer, ground down. Tunnels, foundation, dams, everything that we put. Our best work is work that you do not see. So that's what we do. So when I was asked to speak at this workshop, I thought my talk would be like 5-10 minutes, then I was asked to expand it to about an hour. So I'll try to stick to time. Today I'm also very particular about that. I have lots of slides, I'll be skipping things. The work I'm going to introduce you to is work I have done over the last 15 to 20 years, by the way. I was playing in AI before AI was hip, okay? First, as a faculty member, my work is actually the work of my students. And this is some of the more recent set of students I've been working with on this topic, which I really am very grateful for. And anything I do say, which is incorrect, it's my fault, by the way, they do great work. So a little bit of an outline. I'm going to actually start a little bit backwards in my presentation. First, I'm going to talk to you about my perspective as my role as a professional civil engineer and my responsibilities for the physical infrastructure. What are we supposed to do? Then I'm going to talk a bit about data in geotechnical engineering. You cannot talk about AI without talking about data. And knowing what data you're working with is going to matter, and it's going to impact what comes out the other end of whatever AI model. Then I'm going to illustrate to you some select AI applications, talk about challenges of explainability and the role of the engineers. So I'm focusing a lot on explainability and then some opportunities. I think we're at an exciting time. So what do, especially me as a geotechnical engineer? We are responsible for building the physical infrastructure around us. You're looking at these different projects here in different locations. You probably noticed I focus on underground tunnels. You're looking at the Boston Central Artery. You're looking at Los Angeles Metro. These two I've worked on both as an engineer, but also as a researcher. And then one is deep excavation for George Washington University. So what I would like my ultimate AI is I would type in, please design this for me and tell me what construction sequence I should do. And hopefully the other end comes all the plans, the specs, and suggestions, and hopefully it actually works, right? It's a huge responsibility. Look at this. I have a building next to an excavation. If this thing fails, I'm in trouble. Not only I could damage the building, actually, unfortunately, people may get hurt. So we need to really keep in mind that responsibility. Within that context, within that framework, we as engineers are subject to a number of codes and codes of ethics, code of practice. ASCE is our premier professional organization, American Society of Civil Engineers, and Dr. Brio was at some point the president of ASCE. There are fundamental canons that engineers should uphold, and one would say using their knowledge, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, using their knowledge and skill for the enhancement of human welfare and the environment. The other one I highlighted, engineers shall perform services only in areas of their competence. Think about it when you start thinking about AI, what's your area of competence? The other one is the National Society of Professional Engineers. So as a professional engineer, in pretty much any state in the United States, and there are equivalent to those societies in other countries in terms of licensure, you get a PE, a professional engineer license, and they have some fundamental canons that you have to actually pass an ethics test, etc. Perform only in the areas of their competence, avoid deceptive acts, Remember we talked about hallucinations, for example, in large language models. Well, you want to know when you're hallucinating. I also picked a few other things in terms of rules and codes that they would like us to conduct. A professional civil engineer has a legal responsibility to design and construct projects that prioritize public safety, comply with all applicable laws and regulations. As an engineer who stamps these drawings, and by the way, we stamp the drawings and the designs, you therefore are asserting different things, but also you take on a huge legal responsibility as an engineer or a company, and there is liability and litigation associated with it, etc. So whatever tools you use, blaming the tool versus blaming the engineer, I think this is something we need to follow. Now, for really complex projects, we have a peer review process. We convene a peer review panel for complex projects. Why? Because for many of these complex projects, we don't have codes, procedures that specifically apply to these unique cases, and therefore we bring in experts from that are independent of the projects to review, unconstrained by all the constraints of these large mega infrastructure projects. And I've been on several of these, I've served on those, and you bring in this unbiased opinion. And that's very important. And I highlight the concept of a peer review process because that might actually be something we want to think about when we are talking about explainable AIs, ethical AI, all these kinds. So what are some of our common engineering tools in use? I simplify them, of course, greatly. One would be empirical. That is, we've had observations over time. We developed design charts like the chart you're seeing here. This one we use to design deep excavations and estimate deformations that are caused by these excavations. Why are we interested in that? Because if I have an existing building next to me, I want to make sure I don't damage it. Now, one thing I want to highlight with these empirical charts, they represent a gross simplification. Okay? They have imperfect interpolation, extrapolation. Well, you better be careful with that. The engineer is ultimately responsible and carries the professional responsibility for that. We have more advanced numerical methods, finite element, finite difference, that really help us deal with the difficulties of specifics of these. And by the way, I've used both in my years of practice and research. They give you a sense of ability to predict. And in fact, they produce really such cool and realistic graphics that you start to believe them. Can we always explain them? Many engineers use them without actually understanding them. And I'll give you an example of that. But you as an engineer ultimately respond. In my peer reviews, I have actually reviewed products like these. And I've always wondered, what are the engineers? Have they evaluated the results? Did they understand that actually this does not make sense? Why? Because they ended up, and what we discovered? They imposed the wrong empirical, the boundary condition, the wrong material property, wrong number of things. So they didn't ask enough questions. So a brief pivot to artificial intelligence and civil engineering. It really has been with us for a long time. Going back to Alan Turing with his pioneering paper on computing, machinery, and intelligence. In the US, we have, the US Army Corps of Engineers were very, very interested in that. In 1986, for example, a report by CERN, Construction Engineering Research Lab, talked about the long-term commitment to research and development expert system. At the time, it was called expert systems. And then we use it, this going back to Professor Jamshid Yalousi at the University of Illinois, to use artificial neural networks to represent material behavior in lieu of conventional plasticity or elasticity models. Now, we talk about AI, but I know we all recognize there are so many different AIs, right? Are we talking about science of an engineer of making intelligent machines? You have control planning, natural language, machine learning, deep learning, and of course, new things we are learning about, LLMs, RAGs, agents, all these things are coming into play. I'm going to touch on a few of these, by the way, not all of them, and I've had the opportunity had over the years to work in these different spaces, and of course, more recently, I'm playing around with LLMs in addition to more conventional artificial neural networks. The artificial neural networks that I used early in my career are like Stone Age tools compared to the artificial neural networks that we have today, by the way. So, what are the ingredients in civil geotechnical engineering? Data and knowledge. Data is supreme. You really need to have good data. And when we're talking about data on which you're going to base an engineering decision that affects the life safety of people, it better be good data. The AI models, selection, that's the purpose. What are you trying to do? It can be simple, it can be very complex. Training evaluation, how do you do that? How do you explain, understand the results, and then you have ultimately the use, application, and professional responsibility. Recently, I actually ran into this when I was going through LinkedIn. Someone put in the Norwegian Geotechnical Institute is a premier institute in Norway that have done a lot of contributions in geotechnical engineering, and they put in a guide for machine learning best practices. I looked at it carefully. You can kind of see there some ideas about explainability and things like that. I think that it's a good effort in that direction, but you can see the details of the steps they're talking about. Still, nowadays we talk about explainable AI, XAI. We see that a lot. And explainable artificial is a set of processes, methods that allows human users to comprehend and trust the results and output created by machine learning algorithms. Nice graphic, and you ask Gemini, this is what it gives you. Therefore, kind of the process associated with it. And some of it is algorithmic, and some of it is people, human. And I think this is where we need to maybe consider the shift into now our role as domain specialists is to actually play that role of making sure that our AI models, with their various degrees, are giving us something they like. So, briefly, data in geotechnical engineering. Our data, we're geo as in geology, Earth, we are interested in most of the things we do in ground is we cannot see. We need to collect information about the ground, and we do that. We also observe things, the observational approach, how the structures are reacting and their response. And we look at the tools that we have used to kind of capture this data, and it's really changed from remote sensing with pigeons to modern day tools of the Internet of Things kind of. And from simple graphics to artificial neural networks, large language models of learning, and using that data. We went from what we call shallow machine learning, simple graphical relationships, to now we have data that we cannot really put in within a simple Excel sheet and plot simple relationships. So let me now take you, and I'm going to pivot into some selected applications in geotech engineering. I'm going to talk tunneling, strut loss and temperature analysis, physics-constrained AI. It's one type I'm going to talk about, self-learning simulations. I'm going to talk about the virtual geotechnical assistant, the emerging role of LLMs and agents. So we'll start first with sort of the premise of everything is the domain knowledge is really bridged to explainable AI. That's what I'm going to be focused on. We're going to talk about issues of problem of unbalanced data. And actually, earlier this morning, we did see that, is that if your data is unbalanced, you have more data in one space versus another, the answer will be more concentrated on that data as opposed to that, even though it's actually very important. Feature selection, and in fact, if you use AI without really careful consideration, you could get misleading explanation. So you need to be careful about it. Model architecture, really important. And then explanation validations. There's SHAP and other tools, and we'll talk about where sometimes it can tell us to do something that is technically correct but nonsensical. So, first case is Los Angeles Metro. Los Angeles has been building even though it's known as the home of the car, there's a massive network of tunnels that has been built, all in anticipation now of the Olympics that's coming up, and they're building different lines. And when you're doing urban tunneling, any type of construction in urban areas, you're concerned about the impact of your activities on existing buildings, because I don't build a tunnel in sort of empty space. Of course, driving from Houston here, there's lots of empty land, but that's not how it works in urban tunneling. You have to worry about buildings, utilities, etc. And you cause deformation. It's a simple action-reaction. You remove soil, the ground moves, and I need to worry about that. And so they did a lot of a major monitoring campaign, and thanks to the Los Angeles Metro, we really had fantastic collaboration over the last 5 years. They gave us their data to work. We work with these large tunnel boring machines, which are amazing, modern, high-tech tools, whereby we measure everything. There are sensors detecting everything. In this particular one, we have over 80+ sensors that are providing a stream of data, or every few seconds or every few minutes. This one, 10 seconds, for example, here. And it measures everything from the push pressure. I'm not going to, again, to go too much into this, to the pressure on the lining, to the screw conveyor that's taking the mud, to the weight of the material that's being taken out. You have all this data. And when we look at this data, it depends on the space you work with. We end up with things on the order of about 1 billion data points. For us, that's huge. We're talking about, before these modern tools, a few hundred data points. Now I'm having to deal with 1 billion data points, and I'm trying to relate them to something. And I also have these instruments on the surface to measure the movement of the buildings, of the ground. And so how do I manage these? I can't, as an engineer, just simply put them in an Excel sheet. I forgot what's the limit on Excel nowadays. You can't, right? And you cannot get enough information because everything will become highly simplified. But what we wanted, we were playing around with these to try to establish, what we were trying to do is establish correlation between tunnel boring machine parameters and the ground motion, because if I know that, then I know how to control my tunnel boring machine to limit the ground motions, the surface motions. So here we use something more traditional. We picked, in a biased way, what we thought was the best 6 tunnel TBM parameters. And then we used a simple neural network here, and the output would be the prediction. We train it with data, and then we look at how well it captures it. We use 80% training, 20% evaluation. We can agree or we can debate what percentage. But anyway, when we look at that and we look at the relationship between the predicted versus measured displacements, we find we're at around 0.66. Not great. R squared, again, I'm using simplified metrics here. Why? We just simply use the brute force way of trying to learn what's going on. We only used 6 parameters. We used single point measurements, and we didn't take the information that actually, over a certain drive of the tunnel, of the boring machine, that all of it impacts a particular point, not just one-to-one correlation. And so we improved the architecture. We used a convolutional neural network, transformer layers, and then we still got some little bit improvement. We compare these, the data points are our measurements, and the continuous lines is what our machine learning model is. It kind of looks good, but it seems to have a little bit of bias. We've improved a little bit with one tunnel. We are slightly underestimating the larger segments. When we looked at our data, we realized our data is biased. We have a lot of data points with very small ground movements, and only few data points with larger ground movements. And if you train a neural network, it will learn more about less movement, not more movement. But that's actually the exact opposite of what we want. So what I'm concerned about as an engineer is conditions under which large movements will occur. So what you need to do is rebalance the data. You have to amplify the data with larger ground movements. So here, when we oversample without oversampling large movements, after improving the neural networks, we ended up improving that by rebalancing the data. And rebalancing the data, not biasing the data, because essentially we had a biased data set. because we just simply measured sample more. By the way, this should resonate with us with the earlier talk this morning on this. So we improved things. The other thing was we're trying to figure out what parameters were being impacting mostly the measured settlements. And the one we found mostly was the torque on the cover head. It was interesting. It is indicative of something, but that was only from one drive, which is because we had twin tunnels. We go one drive and then we bring another tunnel going machines in a different direction. Without getting into more of these details, once we rebalance it, we found that that actually is not the best way. Once we bring in our domain knowledge, especially with respect to shear pressure and relative distances, we find that actually it's something else that's controlling, which is the phase pressure as opposed to the torque, and hence we improve our performance. So what did we learn there? Model architecture matters from MLP to CNN. Unbalanced data set does bias our model explanation, so gotta change it, but be very careful. The shaft values technically correct, but they're not necessarily domain valid, and you need to bring in your domain explanation. And feature selection, it has to be aligned with the knowledge. So bringing in that domain knowledge can greatly enhance the value of your AI model in this case. So let me move to another example. I'm flying through ones which basically I could spend a whole lecture on any one of these. Strut loads and temperature analysis. And this is, let me explain to you why this problem is important for us. If you have steel and you have temperatures that change, they can buckle. This is an example of buckling of a rail line with the heat. For urban excavations, we use these steel. Let me actually change here my pointer so you can see. You see now the pointer? Okay. So these are steel bracing, and they are subjected day and night to different changes in temperature. And if you're in a place like the US, Illinois, or in Boston, summer and winter, the temperatures change dramatically. And so that will cause movements, but also some of the load. You can calculate what the ground is going to put into the strut, but if you don't account for the increase in load due to the temperature expansion, you can buckle your struts. You can actually fail your excavation. So we need to understand that. Conventional way of doing that is actually a pretty simple thing. It says that the load to the temperature is a function, some constant coefficient, times its temperature difference. So you can see this, but then also you have data outside of that cluster. So we wanted to see, but of course we use a constant ambient. Okay. So we wanted to start using, say, an artificial neural network, machine learning to see, can we reproduce that, can we improve it? We used one with very trivial, delta T, M, and delta P. We made one layer and we did the training neural network, and lo and behold, we did get an M, very similar to what was observed. But the question is that it? Because here now we need to be careful. Now I actually fit my neural network to my preconceived notion of how the system should behave. The system is actually not behaving that way. So you will notice there's some jump in the data, but you cannot explain physically. This is after the temperature correction. The orange is coming for the temperature correction. This is load versus date. So we expanded the neural network. We had more or less the same input, the same output. I just allowed for more hidden layers in there inside. And then when we actually developed the relationship, we noticed that actually it's a nonlinear relationship, not a linear relationship. So now here I'm using AI, ANN, to discover new knowledge, and that's important. So, because if we keep on using the tool the same way we use classical tools, that's one way, but actually this is not allowing for knowledge discovery, and that's important. And when we improve it, we separate the temperature load from the earth load, and this is ongoing work for one of my PhD students, and we're looking at adding things such as construction sequence and as the excavation sequence change, the configuration changes. Now let me talk about more on knowledge discovery, and that's a little bit more even involved. This is called extracting underlying material behavior. Soil is a very difficult material to model. Has highly nonlinear behavior. So I'm going to talk to you about the self-learning concept. It's really a physics constrained type of AI. And I'm going to explain to you via self-learning applied to excavations. For those of you who were not in the workshop that we held a couple of months ago, it's actually, we've applied that to excavations, lab testing, to red blood cells, to cornea, and it all works very, very well. So the whole idea is a feedback loop, control feedback loop. It goes from control theory back to the Wright Maxwell and also the Wright brothers, whereby think of your cruise control system. You're adjusting, you're trying to measure what's going on, and then you adjust your speed. Well, guess what? We use that the same way in geotechnical engineering to try to understand excavation behavior. And this is, we have different types of inverse problems. I'm focused on the middle one, whereby I know the input, I know the output, I want to know the internals of the system. And that is classic civil geotechnical engineering, what we call observational method. I do my design, I start my observations, and then I realize it didn't match my prediction. I make some changes, update my model based on the facts on the ground, and then move on forward with that. That is during construction, but the amount of information we extract from it is very limited. So what we chose to do there is to use this self-learning simulations, whereby we do build a finite element mesh representation of the actual excavation. And then this is where I have also my observations, and I run two simulations. One is what we call an equilibrium simulation of force equilibrium and stresses, and I extract my stresses. I represent the excavation sequence. In the second one, I impose what I measured in deformations, and because of compatibility, I extract strains. I now have stress-strain pairs, and instead of using a conventional material model, plasticity, I use an artificial neural network-based model. And then I repeat the process until the two simulations give me a converge, and then I declare victory. And if you're interested in these, I can give you, we have many papers on that. Question is material model, it's an inverse problem. And as you know, in inverse modeling, we have a problem of uniqueness, right? Do I get the correct answer? Oh, that's really interesting. So first, let me kind of dig in a little bit deeper with our artificial neural network material model. Those of you who know about constitutive modeling, we're very much interested in the stiffness of that model, how it changes. Well, it turns out, if you really know your neural networks, they're actually easily differentiable. That's why backpropagation model training works. But I took advantage of that before I fully understood backpropagation. And I developed a tangent stiffness matrix, which is actually the universal solution for the neural network. That is important. Why? Because whatever I train, I now know the gradient of it. And knowing the gradient of your function is very, very important. It's also important for actually material modeling. So we demonstrated that this thing works really well and allows us for highly nonlinear problems to achieve a quadratic convergence. So it's really this artificial neural network is not a black box, despite what people like to say. It's just, you just need to know how to program it. So we applied it to an excavation in the Boston area. It's called the Scala Center on the MIT campus. It's actually specifically Cambridge. And we have data there. We have the soil profile there, which consists of classic Boston blue clay, and then glacial till followed by glacial till. What you're looking there at is an excavation with tiebacks to hold the wall back, and the excavation is here, and we're trying to hold the ground here. And they measured the deformation there. So we started our self-learning simulations, whereby we're not learning the deformations, we're learning the underlying material here. We're actually trying to discover. We start our neural network assuming it's a pretty stiff linear elastic behavior, and then we just let the model evolve to better match the observations. And then we get this behavior. So now I've matched the actual observations. The question is, what kind of soil behavior do I get? Well, it turns out that the black solid line is what we measured. We started with this dashed line, and this is what lab experiments done 30 years earlier showed us. actually looked pretty cool. Now, the exact underlying behavior is highly nonlinear, so it's just simply extracted that knowledge from the boundary value problem. I didn't give it directly that information, so this is where I created data, where I had a little bit of data, but I created a lot more data on the soil behavior. And it's comparable to known behavior. So with this physics constrained AI, because I'm using this material model within a finite element mesh, I actually, I couldn't prove it. We did then hundreds, if not thousands of simulations on many different problems. Whenever this algorithm did not converge, it turns out we provided it with bad data. We didn't realize it at the time. Either we mismatched the different construction stages, or forced displacement compatibility, or made an error, or the data itself had something wrong with it. We could explain. Then when it converged, it actually really recovered material behavior consistent with things we know. Meaning we didn't get nonsensical behavior. Because a lot of times people told me, you will get nonsensical behavior. I said, look, I'm happy, show me how it happens, because it never happened to me. It's an empirical inference, but it's really, so we postulate that the constraints imposed by the solution of the boundary value problem, equilibrium and compatibility, are sufficient to A, detect error in the input data, and B, prevent the development of unreasonable material behavior. So, pretty cool. So it's actually explainable. It even gives me more than conventional techniques. Because by the way, the competing technique for that would be optimization. If you know about those, one technique for material modeling. The problem is once you start with one material model, you can never let it evolve. This one will evolve. Okay, so now let me pivot yet again. Talk about generative AI, of course. It's the talk of the town. This is what we really love, and we're all impressed. ChatGPT, Gemini, Copilot, DeepSeek, Llama, you pick. Okay? So I just picked one, ChatGPT, actually I should say more, my students picked one. And what we did is we asked ChatGPT, and this is what's available to the world, a technical question to tell us about, we provided it with the characteristic quantitatively of the soil, and we asked it if liquefaction, which is the process with which you seismic shaking the soil turns into a fluid, basically. If you heard about quicksand kind of thing, it's kind of similar to that. And tell us, whether liquefaction will happen. And then ChatGPT gave us actually equations that look remarkably correct. Okay? I didn't have to go hire a specialized geotechnical engineer, by the way. I just asked ChatGPT, the version available to you, at least 4.0, right? Now they keep on updating and improving. So what we found is there's something called the effective stress, the stress that is between the particles. To do a good calculation. It also had some correct equations, but incorrect results. And it actually had incorrect equation and units for the tip resistance of the CPT. It has an oversimplification of the relationship between these two important parameters. I'm not going to know. So ChatGPT generally followed the correct liquefaction triggering analysis procedure. However, it made several mathematical errors and incorrectly applied empirical correlations. So, you're an engineer who doesn't know what they're doing, just simply used it, put it in a calculation, made the design, earthquake happened, failed, you could be in trouble. However, is the glass half full? Allow me to say no, it's half empty, and I say it's half full. Why? This is still the early stages of ChatGPT, and we haven't put in agents, right? We heard about agentic AI. And let's see how that works. So now, I'm not going to say specifically, just give you that. What's the idea of an agent? The agent is, think of it as, well, first we have the geotechnical engineer in the loop, but let me now, agents, think about it as the specific knowledge, the domain knowledge that you have in your discipline, the courses you teach, lectures you've given, etc. You can now all put them in, and by the way, it is absolutely, it's become so simple so easy to do that you can develop these agents that you can combine with these large language models. And we developed one for our earthquake engineering class to become our virtual TA, which was available 24/7. So when my students come up with a question at 2 a.m. of the day on which I have an exam, and they kind of wondering why I didn't answer. So the exam is at 8 a.m. It's 2 a.m. in the morning, and I went to sleep. It's really difficult for me to answer those questions. The agent AI can do that. It has all the information about the class in one place. And this is with Copilot. This semester. So when we built this one, it took us actually quite a bit of time while this thing is playing. It took us a few months to build it. For the course I'm teaching this semester, it's called Computational Geomechanics. I decided to build it 2 weeks ago on a weekend. It took me 1 hour. I put in all of my class notes. Gosh, it knows how to answer the questions. And it gave them with what I call engineering precision. Okay? This is within University of Illinois has a relationship with Microsoft, and many universities have different. And so we have that, and we have access to this Copilot Studio. I was actually pleasantly shocked at how good it was. In fact, it made me wonder is that what am I teaching, or why am I teaching this stuff? Because it's answering questions that I give usually in an exam. Okay, it's literally answering those very easily. So maybe we need to think something different about it. Okay, into the future. XAI, so we talked about this. Let me tell you that the problem we're talking about, explainability, is not new. Let's talk about the Nichols Highway collapse in 2004. Engineers use the software called Praxis. It's a finite element software to do a design and then use those numbers. And the highway unfortunately collapsed. This is an excavation under construction. This excavation collapsed. And unfortunately, there were fatalities as well associated with it. Immediately, the engineer said, it was the fault of the program. I used it, it gave me the wrong answer. But upon further investigations, it turns out the engineers did not know what they were working with. They didn't know how to use the software. And in fact, they tried to actually make a claim against the software, and actually since then, Praxis has this disclaimer at the beginning. It's sort of an obvious thing, is like, you should know what you're doing when you're using the tools. So explainability is really not new to us. And when we don't apply our critical thinking to its results, we will bear the responsibility. Actually, I'd like to posit that modern LLMs, potentially, if we can inoculate them with all these cases, there's no failure, maybe they could help us from making these mistakes, repeating these mistakes again. Why? Because no single engineer can understand all these failures that happen around the world, and hopefully there's a good investigation about it. So where does that take us? So if you go back to Asimov's 3 laws of robotics in iRobot, about no injury to human, etc. Maybe we can integrate some of ASCE and NSPE rules canons into our LLMs, AIs as a guardrail. But are there downsides, believe it or not? This question you should always ask yourself, are there downsides to this? Well, we recognize that there are important roles for the domain knowledge and domain experts for XAI. But we need to be very careful of inherent bias of existing knowledge and experts. I mean, this is why in a lawsuit you have experts on both sides. If there is one absolute knowledge, they shouldn't disagree, right? But also experts can be biased. And so if you let that come in too much, you can actually limit the potential for data pointing to new knowledge, the outlier syndrome. Just let me remind you that all new ideas were unicorns, that the Earth revolves around the sun. If I apply the dogma of the era, we would never be learning about it in that whatever LLM of that day, or plate tectonics, right? People did, in fact, the first person came the idea of plate tectonics, if the plates move, and that's what causes earthquakes. People really, that the established scientists said, no, this is a bad idea. So we need to be very, very careful, tread carefully with these things. Physical constraints, we show with something like self-learning simulations, can lead to stable solutions, but we need to be careful not to over-constrain because our data may indicate a flaw in some of the assumptions we have made. So any potential guardrails need to be exercised with a light touch. That's my suggestion. And solution provided with and without, and in case they are inadvertently biased the results in a disadvantageous way. That's how I recommend we do it. We are still learning how to apply this technology, and we do not want to overly constrain ourselves prematurely. I think there are exciting opportunities that go beyond traditional disciplinary boundaries because guess what? I can have an agent that learns technical engineering and learn poetry, structural engineering, philosophy, environmental engineering on the liberty now, architecture, etc. And that agent is likely to give me a solution superior than just one engineer who knows this, who then talks to another engineer or specialist in another, and trying to come up with an overall solution to serve our society. Thinking about a multi-layered system AI, so these are our future. So this is the kind of thing we are talking about. Newer system AI, make sure we talk about explainability, distortion, because regulatory considerations, and role of engineering. I'd like to say we still have a role, very, very important role as engineers, scientists, specialists in our field. It's different than what we talked about. And with that, thank you so much, and I'm happy to take any questions.
I think we'll have plenty of time for questions. Does anyone have questions? No?
Oh.
The rate at which, thank you, you said well done. The rate at which AI is progressing, when you talk about developing rules, it seems that the rules may progress slower than the progress of AI, and therefore the rules have to be very flexible. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Absolutely. In fact, this is where I talk about the light touch. Is that if you try to prematurely constrain it with what you understand now, you are likely not to realize the full potential. So we have to be very, very careful to not over, lack of better word, regulate. I understand the concerns about the data issues and what others may be maliciously doing with our data. And we need to be super careful. In fact, I always caution my students about that. But we need to be very careful not to re-constrain ourselves because we are likely to make mistakes. Think of the early days of Uber, right? They just went completely around the regulations, right? And they became very successful, but of course they captured all of their data. And even think of the earliest cars, they were called horseless carriages, right? Because literally they took out the horse and put the engine. And then it changed and became the modern car we were. So we need to be, that's the part. How do we strike the balance? They do no harm, but not over constrain ourselves because of perceived concern. I think we just need to be careful about that.
Yeah, I think there's another question.
Thank you. In the ACEC space, that's where my primary customers are, and I found that there's very much of it. If it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of people. Still printing out, using vellum and red line markups with actual pins instead of using Bluebeam or things of that nature. From the AI space and machine learning and things, where do you see the entry point for most ACEC businesses, especially like mid-market or smaller?
So I struggle with that because I'm also called upon by colleagues, sometimes just informally asking me, so how do we deal with that? And so what I ask them to do is to look at their processes. The biggest challenge I'm hearing about nowadays is the shortage of engineers. There are not enough engineers to actually do the work. And I tell them, okay, here's an example how you can use these systems to compensate for the lack of engineers. Because there are, and what they're often referring to is ones who do entry level type of engineering. Well, that usually is pretty formulaic, you know. And if you can have a process, you can automate. And so you show them how that relates to their bottom line when they start going into it. And it will be different from enterprise to enterprise, right? Simply we talk about Bluebeam, right? And I know, in fact, I sit on panels whereby the other members of the panel want the hard copy and they mark it up. I am a Bluebeam person, and the difference is for the client, they very quickly get my comments back, and with the other ones, they miss something, etc. Just tracking things to be more efficient. That for certain projects, it doesn't matter. If you don't like it, you're not going to be part of the project. It actually becomes that part. It's almost like you're now no longer there, right? So it becomes a competitive advantage. It's the bottom line, right? Business, bottom line, am I able to make money or save money or improve my process, get an edge over my competitor? That's where I think we'll have to end. But we need to, you go in the same way you go and study a business, ask them about how to improve their other business processes. It's the same thing. In fact, in a way that is, in my opinion, it's really exciting. It's like, oh my gosh, I can really transform my business. And you can, and always work with the parts. I wouldn't immediately employ it everywhere, and then because things will break, right? You start with part whereby you think you're going to have allies and people who are going to understand that this is an emerging technology. I mean, it's really an interesting thing. People say, oh, but look, it's making all these mistakes. I said, you're telling me your engineers don't make mistakes? In fact, I've seen far worse mistakes from, so.
Awesome, thank you.
You're right.
Actually, I have some questions.
Oh, by all means. Yeah.
Thank you for the presentation. I think this is a perfect point where we come from the morning, like it's basically talks related to background, social media, disaster response, so on and so forth, and or even human ethics in terms of philosophy. And this brings another topic, which is infrastructure, right? So I think it's the same on the ground is usually we cannot have a chance to tackle. So, and also I really appreciate your point on the education part. My question is, in the future, what do you expect in terms of collaboration? On the ground, above ground, from different disciplinary, is the experience from a different background could be transferable and informable in future, how we can apply either foundational model or generative model there. So that's the first question.
I think the exciting part about where we might be going, we actually have now better tools to integrate. So let me start with something we started with, which is the natural disasters, right? And we had a number of talks about it. And in fact, there was some interesting ones. So those of you who do not know, one of the things I do also is I go and investigate areas after disasters, earthquakes. I've also went in the aftermath of Hurricane Helene, and I actually did look at damage at the shoreline, erosion, etc. Now, it was interesting in one of the more than one presentation whereby we looked at the street view of, and it says, okay, the differential is actually likely caused by the extreme event. I was on the ground. This was in the Big Bend area of Florida, and I was walking around, and we knew that, by the way, there were sometimes, because of the flooding and the rupture of gas lines, there were fires. So I was in an area and I started taking a picture of a burnt down structure. And all indication, if you don't talk to anybody, you would think that this was caused by a rupture, and you would speculate, right? Because we have more information. So I was just, then I walked across to the neighbor and I started chatting, having a chat with the person. very kind. So can you tell me what happened? He says, no, it's actually a couple of days before they had a fire. And before the hurricane came, the utility company shut off all the gas and all the electricity, so we couldn't have fire like that. So if I rely purely on AI and imaging, etc., without ground truthing, I have a problem. I just wanted to mention that because it's something I had, I mean, this is, when did I encounter that? Whenever Helene after Helene, just a few months back, because I was on the ground there. Now, in terms of another element, so for example, we use a lot of INSAR for geospatial data, and we're dealing with it because we're interested in sort of building the settlement, etc. I'm also co-leading the geotechnical project for National Institute of Science and Techniques for the collapse of Champlain Tower, and people are interested in subsidence, etc. And we are finding that different people are interpreting the same data set very differently. And I think we need to come together because we need to bring in the in-depth knowledge about the ground versus the observation and fairly shallow knowledge about the ground. Fairly or superficial, sort of more sort of, because we're seeing that issue and that's leading to, unfortunately, incorrect interpretations. So we need to be very careful about that. There's a huge potential for us to work together. That's why we should go, logging in Houston, for example. Some of the work that Professor Rio, myself, etc., we work on. We have an understanding of how these things interact with the levees, but also, how you also have the ground, water clear, etc. So I think there's tremendous opportunities, and these kind of tools hopefully will accelerate that instead of making us. We've ever been going in these silos that grow and grow and grow, and it's like, why aren't we talking to each other? So I see a lot of potential.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Can I have one?
Sure.
Quickly. That brings up another issue, which is merging the concepts of risk with AI. Because the risk assessment associated with AI will be an evolution that's part of the picture.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much again for the opportunity.
Thank you. Really have the time. I think speaking of the infrastructure, one thing we have to mention is transportation. And this will be transition to our next session, next panel, which will be focused on the transportation, mobility, and also privacy in terms of urban. So our first presenter will be Dr. Zhang Yunpeng from Engineering Lab. And he is an associate professor in computer information system and information from the University of Houston. And he also is a director for the US DOT UTC Transportation Cybersecurity Center for Advanced Research and Education. And he got a lot of funding from NSF DOT, NIH, Texas DOT, and some other private institutions. Let's just hand over the stage to Dr. Yang to learn what we have seen or not seen from the transportation. Thank you.
Okay, so welcome back. So can you hear me?
Yes.
Firstly, sorry, so for the technical problem, so sometimes it's happening. Okay, so I would like to say thanks for Dr. Ye and Dr. Zhou's invitation so for this workshop. And so I'm very glad to share what we did so with everybody. Yeah. Okay, so my presentation title is Hybrid Quantum Computing and AI for Intrusion Detection Intelligent Transportation System. Okay, so we transportation, of course, there's some overlap with the geography. Also, so I would like to seeking collaboration. So whatever in geography, transportation, civil engineering, so industry engineering, and construction management, so field. Of course, also, so computer science. So generally speaking, I'm a computer science person. Yes, so there's the agenda. So including four parts, so background, proposed approach, so evaluation, and the conclusions. So a little bit background. So this research is supported by US DoD Tier 1 ETC, Transportation Cybersecurity Center for Advanced Research and Education. So normally we call it cybercare. Yes, so it's funded by so that's US DoT logo and UTC program logo, cybercare program, cybercare center logo and UH logo. Yes, so there are three parts for the center. The first one is research, second one is education, and the third one is technology transfer and collaboration. In the center, we currently have 6 universities. So UH is the lead, and also Rice. So Texas A&M at Corpus Christi. So also we have University of Hawaii, University of Cincinnati, and ERU. So people call it this so Harvard in the sky. So they are strong in flight aviation field. Oh, by the way, so we will host our second seed project. So this year in Hawaii. So everybody is welcome. Okay, so that's a center strategic framework and the research is thrust. So we focus on safety, economic strength, so and also global competitiveness, including 4 parts and for the details. So if you are interested in anything, so we can discuss that later. So this part. There are 4 thrusts. So in our center. So the second one is AI application and translation data security. So today, so my presentation is in this thrust. So the center has been found 2 million federal funding and plus 1 million non-federal funding. So every year. Yes, so that's a 4 thrust figure. So we are in the third thrust. So today, the second, sorry. Yes, so since we are talking about ITS, so the primary ITS infrastructure is ATMS. So it's Advanced Traffic Management System. Currently in the US, so we have around 10 cities. So they so use ATMS. So most cities still use the traditional traffic management system. Here, so in ATMS, so generally speaking, so we can call it the smart traffic management system. It's real-time control. So it's based on the traffic, and also it's for CAV, so stand for connected and autonomous vehicle. Yes, so in other words, so connected vehicle or autonomous vehicle can exchange data so with the infrastructure. So that adjusts the traffic control system. Here, so this page is mainly talk about what's intrusion detection. Intrusion detection is a primary cyber attack. So, so whatever on infrastructure side or vehicle side. Yes, so at least 3 cyber topic, watch, call, and challenge. So watch, so that's the explanation what I did. So it's IDS is a system that monitors the network traffic for suspicious activity, including 2 parts. So static and dynamic. So we're mainly talking about dynamic. The challenge is big data, so it's AI related. Also accuracy. So currently, to be honest, so there's not major intrusion detection system for transportation system. So the reason is accuracy is not enough. So for public service infrastructure, normally people expect, so it's greater than 99.99 accuracy. So then people can trust in that. So that's why the US DOT just added cybersecurity as a new field. So in 2022. So before that, there were only 6 fields. So it's over 100 years. So part of them is over 100 years. So several, so it's over more than 50 years. So for the previous 6 fields. So the cybersecurity is the 7th. 7th field. So we expect at least the transportation cybersecurity will be a hard field. So in the next 50 years. Okay, so that's in the ATMS and the intrusion detection background. For our specific research, so that's a literature review examples. Not so many research in this field. So in other words, normally we call it is like so gold mine. So we just get started to dig in at the beginning. So that's pretty good and pretty new research field. In this research, we use quantum computing plus AI. So quantum computing has some strong points other than the traditional AI method. Okay, so I would like to know, so how many people working in quantum computing field currently? Please raise your hand. Okay, so no problem. So just remember, so for quantum computing, if we would like to measure, so how strong, how fast quantum computing, just remember qubit. So if we have more qubit, the speed will be faster. So another one is 1 qubit can store 2 numbers at the same time. So for our traditional computer, so 1 bit only store 1 bit, 0 or 1. But for quantum computing qubits, so they can store 2 at the same time. So I believe that's enough. So for understand this research. Currently, so that's the latest number. So on the internet, so we can search. IBM provide the quantum computing service. So in December 2023, so they have 1,121 qubits. IBM expect they can provide 100K qubits. So in 10 years. So that's a simple prediction mainly explained. So 1 qubit can store 2 bits. So 2 numbers at the same time. Okay, so that's a motivation. So why would like to increase quantum computing to traditional classic computing. So here, Yes, so I believe there's some problem. So when I transfer the slide to PDF, yeah, so that's actually that's two weakness, not a strong point. So here also, so for quantum computing, the weakness is the cost of implementation. So in other words, classical machine learning so has two strong points in this figure, and the quantum computing has three strong points. So in this figure, so we would like to compare them together to follow both strong points. Yes, so this part is right. So whatever cost and deal with big data and handle complex algorithms, and also they can calculate parallel. So that's contributions for our research. By the way, so we already submitted our conference paper to IEEE security and privacy so conference. So that's the top cybersecurity conference. Okay, so the first one is combine both of them together. And the second one is advanced feature selection. So I will talk about the detail. So how many feature selection methods we use. The third one is minimizing quantum requirement. So even so IBM's server, quantum computing server, they only provide 1,000 so qubits. So it's not so many. Actually, it's pretty small. So for example, so if we compare qubit number with traditional computer number, so we easily can get 1 MB, 1 GB bit. So in traditional computer, 1 MB is 1024 bit. And so 1 GB is multiple 1024. So it's pretty big, but qubit is pretty small now. So we would like to use minimize so qubit so for our algorithms. So the last one is real world applicability. Yes, that's what we propose. So that's a pipeline. So we can see this part is two so algorithms combine. Workflow. So that's input state. So the first part is the classic model, and the second one is quantum model. Is data encoding layer and the QNN layers, and also weighting initialization and so iterative so QNN layers and return probabilities. Oh, so for quantum computing, after return probabilities, we can get exact number 0 or 1. So then we can get our outcome. After that, so that's the integration, and then so going to the training and testing so period. Yes, we use 3 data sets so to test our solutions. So that's outcome. Yes, so I'd like to quickly go through so the data sets. Yeah, so that's 3 data sets we use. The first one is the KD99, and the second one is the CCDS, and the third one is CCIOS. So they present different feature data. So for example, KD99 is a well-known attack. It's like a standard or benchmark. So data set for all cybersecurity research. So it's including well-known attacks and 41 features and 24 type of attacks. So this one, so that's the newest attack. So you can see KBD99 is generated in 1999. It's pretty old, but it's a benchmark. So the second one is in 2017. So it's including newest attack and the 79 features and 14 types of attack. The last one is the latest so new data set. It's mainly for IoT based cyber attacks. Okay, so let's go back to here. So that's pre-processing and normalization. So that's 4 steps we use for pre-processing. So that's the first one is LTS auxiliary for outlier data. The second one is label encoder technology to translate label into numeric format. And the third one is one-hot encoding to convert categorical value into numeric. So standard scalar and feature exhibit a uniform scale. That's what we use the feature set. So in total we use the 8 method to implement the feature selection. Propose the quantum classical model. Yes, I believe everybody familiar this part. So easy soon, since we are all in AI field. Okay, so that's including. Okay, so that's a classic model we use. So for quantum model, so here, so I would like to mention we use the qubit. So in our current model, in our current solution, we only use 2 qubits. At the beginning, so we use so much more so than that. At the very beginning, is actually we used so more than 50 qubits. So then we drop down it so step by step. So other side, yes, for later. Okay, so that's the quantum model. So that's the evaluation part. So we evaluate several parts and features. So the first one is qualitative analysis. Okay, so then. Yeah, so this figure is pretty clear to show. So especially the third, so we can see, so before we use our solution, so to compare the traditional solution, the third feature is pretty significant, so drop the down. And also the second one is similar. Yes, so the directly question, so after we get the outcome, so we would like to figure out why is the third so drop down a lot. I guess so. If I can question, maybe that's a direct question. We are continue to figure out so why the third one is not the first and second one. Yes, so that's what we are continuing to do. So after the conference paper, so the next step, so after more evaluation, we are cutting to the journal paper. Okay. Yes, so that's the system performance. So we did our evaluation. That's a training performance. So we use. So for example, that one is for KDD99, and the second one is CCEDS, and the third one is CCIoT. So CCIoT looks like more smooth. Yes, so the reason is, so currently we figure out is, there are most new, attacks. Okay, so let's continue to new performance. Yeah, so that's, on this page, we provide the accuracy numbers. So for PD99, we get the accuracy 98.96, and the CCBS is 99.40 percentage. So of course, just now I mentioned, so for from the beauty side, so they would like to get 99.99. It's like what the public can accept. So we are continuing to go to that target. So after that, so we believe, so we are ready to go to technology transfer stage. Yes, so that's a model comparison. So totally we compare 4 rotational model. It's not perfect currently. So the outcome. That's a conclusion on the future work. So the fourth conclusion is intrusive detection model in HMS and the fusion of hybrid quantum classic computing. And the second one is decrease the number of copy and the computational resources and also increase the accuracy. So the third one is the number. So we apply, we got. So that's actually that's our current work. So we are continuing to research on that. The first one is integration of federated learning, so technology and quantum computing. So the second one is integrating encryption method, so into distributed, so computational operations, enhance data security and privacy. So especially this one. So the fourth one is still current solutions expensive. So we only change the machine learning algorithms, but the second one, so we like to include so cryptographic method. So also that's like a new direction. Okay, so that's the quick introduction about our research. So due to the time limit, so if you are interested in any point, so we can discuss more. We can time for
We can take one question from here. Questions for you? Actually interesting. Computing is using transportation.
Okay. So here, that's my email address. So you are welcome to contact with me.
Okay, let's welcome to our next speaker. This is also a rising star in transportation, who is Dr. Tu Renhong. He is assistant professor in computer science, director of the Trustworthy Autonomous Human Center and Embodied Intelligent Growth in Texas A&M. And please welcome him.
Hello. Yeah. Thanks for the nice and short introduction. So yeah, I have a slide to also introduce our lab. So it's lucky that I have prepared that. Okay. Yeah. So today I'm gonna talk about scalable trustworthy and end-to-end collaborative, right? So thanks for Dr. John to give some of the background about intelligent transportation systems and how does the connected vehicles works. So I'm gonna first do a little bit about myself. So I graduated from UT Austin, so I see a couple of long points here. So look up, yeah. So I joined Texas A&M in computer science, so I have a slightly different background with many of you guys. So because we do more like fundamental AI. So I also have some experience in industry. So I worked for Google Research for 2 years, where we deploy these generative models and foundation models on smartphone and edge devices. And so what our group is interested in is that in general, we just do generative AI. So 2 parts. First part is from the left, text image, text video generation. And the right part is to more like a fundamental multimodal large language models, such as these vision language models, video language models. More recently, we also look a lot on the agents. So more specifically, we are trying to also make these models because they are pretty hard to control. So we want to make them trustworthy and safe to use, such that we can deploy these models safely and securely on some embodied devices, such as like a smartphone is really not really embodied device. I also include here. Specifically, autonomous systems, robotics, robotic arms, and etc. Okay. So I was going to talk about a little bit about collaborative perception. So we know that autonomous driving has been really pretty mature, right? So we see Waymo cars like in Austin, everywhere. But as mature as they are, they still have some fundamental limitations. For example, for this case, it is a very challenging case even for humans. Like you have an obstacle, and you're the illegal vehicle, no matter what sensor you use, you will be blocked by this obstacle. And if you have a pedestrian just suddenly going like have a football, just go running through the streets, and there's no way that the single vehicle can really prevent this from happening. And most of the accidents actually occur in these very corner case scenarios. Yeah. And connected and automatic vehicles, or CAV, or you can say B2B cooperation, it's very promising to solve this type of question. Because imagine here, you have another vehicle which can speak to you, right? So they have shared perception. And then another vehicle is highly likely to have the perception of the direction. And if you can really communicate, so that can enable the whole system to another level of safety, because you have a lot of you can really prevent a lot of blind spots. However, so we talk about system design. So imagine in the future, maybe the future is already now. So you have multiple connected systems. So we have the Tesla, we have multiple sectors, Waymo, we have the Cruise, right? So they are not going to share data with each other. So they have different collaboration systems. So such as that you have the blue protocols, you have the pink protocols, and they are not collaborative, right? So the challenges are that suppose in the future we have multiple connection systems. How do we gonna collaborate them all using when they have different types of data, training model, different types of system design, and they cannot really communicate with each other because there are multiple private sectors, right? So this here is kind of our proposal, which is just accepted to ICR 2025, just accepted a few months ago. So we actually provide a model agnostic system that we can enable without this multiple system to really release their data. They can collaborate in a model agnostic way. So for example, you can see that that figure shows that if you do direct collaboration between different heterogeneous systems, you will have a very bad detection result. So here you can see that roadmap segmentation is really have a lot of noise because that they're just not homogeneous and not easy to collaborate. So our model has a very good way to increase a system to do very high performance detection, map detection, object detection, etc. So what we're going to do that? So this is pretty complicated. So we do a lot of algorithms. But the highlight here is that for each of the system, we this training adapter and inverter pair. And we have some sort of shared protocol, something like maybe defined by the US DOT or federal governments. And each of the heterogeneous, each of the individual protocol, they can project our shared protocol. And this shared protocol is really maintained by the government. And if you project that and communicate the features, another system can do an inverter to their own system. So there are a lot of learning here. So I think the details in the paper, but our model can really prevent leasing and releasing data because they are not really willing to release their own data and model, etc. So they are doing the they want to protect their IP issues. Yeah, so we can really do this we have a shared protocol. So here is just a very high level 1 minute review of our method. So we can see that the result is actually pretty promising. The lab figure shows that before we do this collaborative learning. So you see that the predictions are really very, very bad. You can see that most of the objects are not captured. And after our collaborative learning, you can see most of the objects and the roadmap segmentation, 3D object detection has been aligned, and also the performance has been improved a lot. Okay, so to summarize, we have really prevented a future towards scalable and secure model agnostic collaboration system that you can enable collaborative perception among different protocols, because they are kind of not non-collaborative and heterogeneous. And we can think about a system to help them to collaborate to improve the whole system level transportation safety. Okay, so the second word I really want to talk about is currently the large machine learning model are pretty promising. Everyone is talking about that. So we also have a lot of work to look at their performance on autonomous driving. But here we are kind of trying to, because these models, we all know that they have hallucinations, they have safety issues. So we are trying to investigate whether they are safe to use in autonomous scenarios, right? So here is we prevent the benchmark, which we look at 5 different axes, like trustfulness, safety, fairness, privacy, and also robustness on how to evaluate these large language models on autonomous things. So the motivation is pretty simple because even though they are pretty powerful, but they are also pretty fragile. They are very vulnerable. So if the large language model, so I'm not gonna use a GPT to drive my car. So I don't believe that because they are very, very unreliable. So they have a lot of hallucinations, right? So you don't really trust a model that has a lot of hallucinations. So they will drive your car. So you're gonna see there's a stop sign, you just say that, oh, it's okay to drive. Just do that, right? So we're gonna really make this model really safe and secure. Otherwise, you'll see this Tesla accidents, cruise accidents. So they have a lot of issues. So we collect all the top driving data set, including the popular new things, cityscapes, and the BADA, Covila. There are like a multiple data set, and we developed a very large data set, a benchmark that we evaluate 5 different dimensions. So this data set is pretty large, one of the largest data sets, and we use visual question answering tasks, like including closed-ended questions, like multiple choices, or yes or no, and also open-ended questions to provide us holistic understanding for driving scene. So here are some of the glance at what we find. So firstly, the trust process. So it's very ironic. We have a lot of VLMs trained for driving tasks, but they are less comparable. They are just worse than the generalists. So that's pretty interesting because we saw that they are trained for autonomous driving, and they are actually not even better than a generalist model like a Llama or Llama. But despite their factual inaccuracy, they are not accurate, but they are pretty uncertain. So their uncertainty is good, but maybe because that the model is pretty small and they don't have the hallucination issues. Okay, so the second axis is safety. So we design 2 levels. Image level safety, we do adversarial attack to these models, and we do contextual safety, which is kind of new because we provide some misinformation in calling from the model. We found that they are pretty vulnerable. it's easy to attack that. And you see that the performance just dropped a lot if the model is pretty, it's not very powerful. Okay, so robustness, we have different visual domain generation, like there are different type of weather conditions and lighting variations, like snowy, foggy weather, noisy, or even it's nighttime. We are just test that and found that they are still pretty vulnerable. So we also do another interesting, like linguistic generalization. We test on different lingo like Chinese, Japanese, Hindi, Arabic, and we found that they don't quite really perform well across different languages. So privacy, so a little bit more, and we also found that they are pretty vulnerable. So basically, I'm gonna skip over these details, but basically we found that from all the trustworthy dimensions, they are all not pretty good. So this just inspired the last topic I'm going to introduce. So we are basically inspired by the latest AMA end-to-end multimodal model for autonomous driving. So Waymo has do this big leap to use pure vision-based large models for driving, and we have sort of do a public reproduction by because we want to develop a framework that can democratize these technologies. So here's our GitHub code. We have it's sort of pretty popular now. We have like over 500 stars. So we have developed a reasoning framework to do this pure vision-based autonomous driving. And this is kind of the one demo. You can see that we can directly feed into this image, and then the large language model, multimodal model, is going to predict the waveforms and do an end-to-end driving. We also do pretty good on light streaming as well. Yeah. This is just, of course, cherry picked, so they are not very accurate actually. So we really call for more attention, especially we have faculty members, researchers from different areas. We want to have this interdisciplinary collaboration on pushing forward the trustworthy and explainable large models or even agents for this autonomous mobility systems to make the system more robust, more safe, more secure. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. So anyone has a question for Dr. Gu? I take one. Okay.
I go to a really interesting part. So I have a question, and I know you don't have much time to introduce the details. So we have an experiment comparing the drive trained vision language models with the general vision language models. And it turns out the performance is actually lower. So what are the missing parts in there? And what do you see as the potential solutions? Should we target on application-specific vision language model, or should we target on developing more general vision language models?
Yeah.
Thanks.
That's a very good big question, I would say. Yeah. So I think multiple parts are missing. So first of all, we don't really have a very good and large scale data set. So because now we have many autonomous driving companies, they are trying to keep the data as a secret weapon. So Tesla, of course, has the most of our largest scale data set, and we still have the new SINS data set as the largest, which is several years ago. So we are missing a large scale representative data set to train this model. So secondly, these models currently they train the VLMs, they are not large enough. They're still pretty small in terms of large language model. So we really want to push forward using a really large model, which has been purely aligned very well and trained on a very massive scale data. So in terms of data scale, model scale, and also how you train that and how much computing resource you put that. So this is really kind of this is about the scale of the data model and also computing resource you put to really push forward this model to really safe and usable level. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. So next, let's welcome Dr. Rao Jingmeng, who is also my alumni from UW Medicine. And he comes way out from California. And welcome, Dr. Rao. Give us speak on specifically GeoAI in terms of privacy.
Hi everyone, my name is Jim Rao. I'm currently at Google, and previously I did my PhD in UW Madison with Professor Song Gao, mainly around the geospatial AI and geo privacy protection. It's really an honor to be here. And there are a lot of very inspiring talks given by Dr. Guchao and all the other professors regarding the ethical AI principles and like how do we design ethical framework to better use and regulate the GeoAI. And in today's my presentation, I want to kind of attach a very specific concrete topic, which is actually on the other side. It's if we have a pretty good geospatial AI models, how do we use that to also benefit our privacy protection that can improve our privacy protection methods using like a geospatial AI. And so basically my talk will be a few parts. The first part, I will briefly introduce the trajectory privacy issues, like what are commonly used method and what are the existing challenges, and how do we deal with that with the geospatial AI. I will share some our recent progresses in addressing these issues. So for trajectory privacy, you know that recently, like we have a lot of like mobile phone or wearable devices, and there's lots of large-scale individual level privacy data coming out every day. It provides a lot of new opportunity to, many research fields such as like mental health and transportation, and they also raises public concerns about the privacy issues. For example, keep in mind worry that they will be identified through their trajectories or their sensitive locations, such as home locations, can be re-identified from the trajectory data. So basically, trajectory privacy refers to an individual's right to prevent the disclosure of the individual identity and associated personal sensitive locations. Due to the increasing public awareness of privacy issues, there are like actually many commonly used privacy protection methods. For example, the de-identification, which is basically just simply anonymize the trajectory data by deleting or masking users' identities from the trajectory dataset. It's a very commonly used, but sometimes it does not work very well because apart from the identifier, there are also like other identifiers such as your date of birth, your gender. If you just concatenate them together, it can also be a very unique identifier for you, given the limited size of the dataset. Another one commonly used actually two methods is like aggregation and geomasking. So basically, it's trying to aggregate, mask, or blur the location of the original trajectory data, so that the original location of the data will not be revealed. This is also like a pretty frequently used. And trajectory also have like a trajectory key anonymization. Basically, it's like we group or mix the trajectories from different users, so that each users cannot be like perceived or from at least another k minus one user in the dataset. So we take multiple trajectory and we mix them together. This is how commonly used method. And we also have a like recently pretty popular is the differential privacy. Basically, we want to add some noise to the query related to a trajectory database, so that other ones cannot determine whether a changes to the dataset is caused by this added noise or it's related to a specific element in the dataset. For example, for location data protection, usually we will add like planar 2D Laplace noise to the trajectory data so that it can fight against some like a query attack. So these are all like commonly used methods, and we also have some like existing challenges regarding. So despite we have some commonly used trajectory protection method. For example, the first one is the privacy utility trade-off. This is like one of the most common problem in the field of privacy protection. For example, these existing methods, when we use it, it's really hard to balance the trade-off between the effectiveness and the of privacy protection and also the data utility. For example, when you want to use aggregation, you need to set the unit, the size of the unit, the level of the unit, and this will somehow limit the resolution of the data. You can set a very large aggregation unit, but you will also lose a lot of the details of your location data. And also geomasking, you need to control the distance threshold. For k-anonymity, you need to determine what's the best k for the current dataset. And for the differential privacy, you need to determine the privacy budget. So these are pretty hard to determine. And the second issue is the data sparsity and the imbalance issues. So basically, due to some sparse sampling rates and or low checking frequency, when we're talking about the social media checking data, usually the data is pretty sparse, like in terms of a spatial dimension or temporal dimension. This is one of the reasons why we have a data sparsity. Another reason is the bias collection due to the privacy concerns. For example, most of the trajectory data set is currently collected from the taxi or Uber driver. Because private car users, they're not going to upload their data to you. So if you build some model based on taxi data, I believe it will be sort of have underrepresentativeness issues. So this is also will affect the utility of your any experiment or models. The third part is called centralized privacy risks. So usually you need to if you use an app or use some like a social platform, they will store your data in their central data set, central database. So you can definitely trust them, but it's technically possible that your data will be leaked or will be abused by the platform owners or be stolen by some hackers. So this is totally possible. So even though you have a lot of privacy protection methods or secrecy regulations, this endogenous privacy risk cannot be mitigated due to this centralized data storage and processing mechanisms. So from these existing challenges, we will have one question. For these challenges, how if or how can we mitigate this or deal with these challenges with the help of geospatial AI? So this is the topic I'm going to further explore. For example, with the geospatial AI, we might be able to generate, directly directly generate the trajectories. Like if it's a really challenging to balance the trade-off, can we just directly generate the trajectory that can? It's not based on existing trajectory, but it's like from the trajectory we already have, and we sort of use model to generate synthetic ones. Can we use this method to better balance the trajectory and the utility and the privacy and utility trade-off? So the idea, so this is one work I did and published on at GIS, and so the idea is like this: giving some aggregation of the trajectories, and we can actually aggregate these trajectories into what we can call a spatial temporal mobility metrics. So basically, this captures the mobility patterns of the user, and this can be seen as a condition. So this is some feature of your or some pattern of your mobility. And if we have a spatially explicit generative model, given this condition, like very aggregated level kind of data or a space-time density cube, can we recover a realistic group of trajectories, which is synthetic data? And if we can have that, we will have a pretty good trajectory generation model. Given a condition, we can summarize, simulate the trajectory we want, the distribution we want. And regarding the privacy preserving, if the mobility matrix we have is a k-anonymized matrix, then we can also have a k-anonymized trajectory generation because the underlying distribution of this mobility matrix is a k-anonymized. So it's a pretty good privacy guarantee. And this is some method details of the work. Due to time, I won't go to detail. So basically, the red ones for generating the mobility matrix, the yellow ones for generating trajectory, and green ones for criticize the trajectory so that they can do adversarial training to make the trajectory quality to be better. And the blue ones, when we have a k-anonymized mobility matrix, how do we generate the trajectory for a further use or publication? This is the overall method design. And this is some experiment results. So basically, this is the data we use. We use some mobile phone data in the area of Madison, Wisconsin. And we also have some baselines such as random perturbation, Gaussian geomasking, and the differential privacy. On the right side, the like figure B is the data distribution generated by our model. A is the raw data, and CDEF is generated by the traditional privacy protection method. So if you simply by eyeballing, you can see that our generated data has a pretty similar distribution with the raw data, which sort of shows the potential for, of a high utility, but we will further investigate that. We did some like a characteristic preservation tests, like we have some collective level and individual level mobility measures, and we compare our data set and other preserved data set, compare their distribution distance with the original data set, and it seems our data set have like pretty close measures with the original one, which is with signal. And also we try to measure the like OD matrices similarity, and it's also pretty similar to the original one. So from the characteristic perspective, it preserved its characteristic very well. We also tried some like utility tests. Basically, it's one location recommendation task, and the other one is the trajectory reconstruction. They both show pretty promising result. For location recommendation, it shows pretty high accuracy compared with the model trained on the raw data, which shows its utility is pretty good. And when we try to reconstruct the user dense trajectory based on their sparse checking data, we also found this actually have a pretty okay-ish similarity in terms of entropy and OD metrics, which sort of prove is a utility in terms of trajectory reconstruction. So finally, we also do the privacy tests. We have two tests. One is the trajectory user linking, which is like try to link trajectory back to its users. And the second one is try to see if we can do the clustering to find the user's home location. We try these two tests, and our model performed all the best. So based on all these three aspects of the testing, we can show that our model basically have a better utility privacy trade-off. So which shows that based on such a like spatial explicit model, it can better model and generate the privacy preserving trajectory data and have good utility. The second one is about so like for the sparsity and the imbalance issues, can we also use GeoAI or spatial explicit model to enhance or to enrich the trajectory like sample rate and its behavior? So here we also have a paper published on a 6 spatial workshop, which basically we try to use the reinforcement learning. It's also a spatial explicit design. We try to use that to generate like dense vehicle trajectories with customized driving behavior. So basically, we'll have a neural network serving as a decision maker. It will control a driving agent. Basically, it's a kinematic model, and we will ask this agent to drive on a 2D map. It's like a very simple design. Basically, it's just like 2D road driving trajectory simulation. And by giving the spatially explicit design of the reward, for example, we will measure whether the driving agent is close to the center line of the road and what's the steering angle, how stable is that. Based on this reward design, we will try to make the driving agent to have a like a normal driving behavior, or is it like easy driving behavior or like drunk driver behavior based on our reward design. So basically, we can customize the driving behaviors based on maybe different design of the reward. So based on that, we can also simulate like high sample rates driver data. And this is like one simulation during training. And on the left side, you can see this is how the training goes. On the right side, you can see how the reward is increasing. So before 1K, I guess you don't want to see the visualization examples full of clarity. But after that, you can see the reward is increasing, which shows they have a pretty good understanding of what we are asking it to do, and to have a pretty good driving behavior. And here we have an example where we actually developed a platform to visualize the generated models, giving the speed limits, acceleration limits, and some other setting for the driving behavior to customize the behavior and you can see it's like having a simulated driving trajectory, and you can also play with that. So this is like this is a collaboration with the American Family Insurance, where we try to develop some method to collect high quality, high sample rate trajectory, driving trajectory data, so that they can better use this data to model their like pricing model. So we were in such a collaboration, and has pretty promising result. So this is the second case study, like whether we can use GeoAI to also enhance the trajectory. We also have some driving tests and the trajectory privacy protection tests. Basically, also pass to that. Like we have some goal for this driving behavior. Like we want to simulate different kind of driving styles, and it all passed the test, which shows pretty promising result. The final one I want to talk about the decentralized trajectory modeling. This is to address the centralized risks. So basically, if saving our data or uploading our data to a platform is not safe, why we not keep the data on our side? This is the key idea, which is also famously known as federated learning. So we will keep the data on the model on the user side, and we will deploy like local models on the user's phone and do local training, and then we do secure aggregation based on the like spatial heterogeneity. We can also do like a local aggregation based on the distribution of the different users based on the geospatial density. So that's something we designed in this work. We also have this framework. We won't go into the details. Basically, we have like a data encoding stage, and we have the location recommendation task modeling. So this is the case we were testing our model on the location recommendation. And then also we have some design for secure aggregation and anonymized aggregation. And depends on different location, we will have also set area aggregation strategy. And also we also have some like a method to indicate to include the auxiliary public data. So we also have some experiment results. We basically also try three things. We test its privacy protection effectiveness and the utility and robustness. For example, the accuracy, we check this performance is actually, it dropped a lot, but not too much, still like at a competitive level, despite we are doing like federated learning, we are not collecting data from users. Still, it's like encouraging performance. And also the home clustering, home located clustering, because the data was never loaded to the server. It also have a pretty good performance compared with other privacy protection methods in a centralized database. And we also tried the robustness, where we tried poisoning tests to the whole structure. It also shows certain resilience. Yeah, so that's about the three case study I did, and this is a conclusion. So basically, for these three challenges: privacy utility trade-off, data sparsity and imbalance, and the centralized privacy risks, we sort of use the design of GeoAI model to try to address this, and we have some parameter model and giving us some promising results. But overall, what I just want to say, like AI is not just a threat to ethical issues or ethics. It could also be a helpful tool as long as we properly use it. So that's all. Thank you.
And for this section, we're going to focus on the scalability and sustainability in high-stakes decision. And we are honored to welcome two speakers from different perspectives, but most basically they will focus on public health and also medicine. And the first speaker will be Dr. Nathan Smith. He is assistant professor at the School of Public Health, also director of MPH program, a program in health law and policy. And what really surprised me is he also has a JD degree. So yeah, let's hand over the stage to Dr. Smith. Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Saving the lawyer for the end of the day is a little cruel, but hopefully it'll be useful. It was nice watching all your presentations because as a lawyer, it's my practice and my academics is law applied to some subject. And coming from public health and being here and
a GIS workshop, it's useful to apply what I know or try to apply it in different contexts. Normally, I work with health data, and I look at all the ways that data, not just health data actually, can be used to promote health more broadly. And in that regard, I have become very interested not only in artificial intelligence and its applications in health, but artificial intelligence as a determinant of health. Looking at all the different ways that deployments of artificial intelligence affect our health and well-being socially. So I have become very interested in this question of artificial intelligence governance. And when I'm talking about governance in this respect, I'm talking about rules, laws, policies, procedures, practices, all of these things that guide the use, development of artificial intelligence broadly. I'm not only interested in questions about what the rules should be, but I think there's also an equally important question that's often overlooked, and that is how should artificial intelligence be governed? And this is an important question because there are many different challenges to regulating artificial intelligence. In fact, many of those challenges have been brought up tangentially by a lot of speakers here. One of them is it's really hard to define artificial intelligence, and you need a definition to regulate something. There are many different aspects of it. It's a shifting technology. It's a very hard target to nail down from a legal standpoint. And the pacing problem, this is something that Dr. Hashash brought up in his talk, where the pace of technology is far outpacing regulators' ability to enact new statutes and regulations that pertain to it. This is something that the Food and Drug Administration has openly admitted in its attempts to deal with AI and ML-enabled medical devices, right? That they are really struggling keeping up with the rapidly changing context. And then, of course, there's the expertise differential between the regulators, people that are making the policies, and the people that are developing the new technologies and deploying them. And this is a challenge that is becoming increasingly exacerbated in the current environment when we're seeing a contraction of the federal workforce, federal regulatory workforce. So if I were to oversimplify approaches to regulate artificial intelligence, I can separate these into two broad camps. There are traditional or hard laws. These are your statutes and regulations. And then there are soft laws. There are the voluntary rules or standards that are created to guide practices within an industry. And these come with their own advantages and disadvantages. And the interesting thing about these two approaches, their advantages and disadvantages are somewhat reciprocal, right? The big advantage to traditional regulation is enforcement. There's a whole range of different ways and tools that traditional law can bring to compel compliance with those standards. But those standards are often implemented by policymakers with insufficient expertise about what they're regulating. Once they're implemented, they're inflexible and blunt to changing situations, and they are very, very slow to adapt. Now, soft laws, on the other hand, they're often created by bodies that have that available expertise, whether they're industry groups or whether they are non-governmental or otherwise, academics, etc. They can be very flexible, they can be changed more quickly. All of these are great, except the enforcement, right? They're often very, very weak in enforcement, and they just don't have the capacity to compel compliance from the people that are using the technologies in sometimes risky ways. There are lots of different examples of these, except for really hard law, right? The big example, the shining example of hard law right now is the European Union's AI Act, right? That's a risk-based framework. Aside from that, in the United States, we've got many examples of proposed legislation, but few examples of them actually making it across the finish line and being enacted into law. soft law approaches, they're everywhere. We've got the United Nations Advisory Body on AI, we've got the NIST AI Risk Management Framework. It's really hard to define what's going on with the Trump administration right now, but everything that I see right now has it pointing to at least a soft law framework, if not entirely deregulatory. FDA, pre-Trump was taking a really innovative, soft-ish law approach. And I'm interested to see where that goes, but don't really have too much time to explain that. Aside from these examples, there was a systematic review in 2021 by Gutierrez and Marchant, showed that over 600 soft law frameworks for AI. One that I'm currently working on, that's in development, that I'm excited to release soon, is the IEEE recommended practice for organizational governance of AI. Now, I've described this dichotomy, but it's not a strict dichotomy, right? There are examples of these blended approaches here. One is collaborative governance, which is where a government will take a soft law framework and somewhat adopt it by incorporating it into their hard law structure. So they might provide carrots or sticks, incentives and punishments for those that choose to comply with this soft law framework. And this is a great way to have the sort of best of both worlds. There are some examples of this in healthcare. Everything that I've talked about thus far has been a top-down approach. And one of the things that struck me from the earlier talks was our good friend and colleague who is choosing to remain anonymous, who asked the question of who's going to do something about this? And his response was no one, right? And that's could be very well the case if we're looking at these top-down approaches. But my colleagues and I, Jen Wagner at Penn State, Meg Doer at Sage Bionetworks, have tried looking at policy innovations that look at a grassroots or a bottom-up approach to governance. And we published one novel framework in Science on the governance of artificial intelligence that we think provides a workable solution to some of this policy quagmire that we're currently experiencing right now. One of the things we do is we take existing legal tools and mechanisms and combine them in ways that's kind of transformative, that could really change the game here when it comes to regulating ethical AI. The first tool that we use is something that I'm sure you're all familiar with. It's copyleft licensing. This is the fundamental principle behind all open source software. It's the idea that you can attach a license to something that you made and you can share it. And everybody that uses that thing is going to be bound by the conditions of that license. And you know what? They can improve it. But if they improve it, the thing they improve is attached or is bound by those same license principles. So this is a set of rules that perpetuates over time and moves as the technology moves. The problem with this approach from an enforcement perspective is it relies on the individual to do something. And that sets up a lot of David and Goliath situations that aren't very productive. What we have done and what we argue is that what we really need to do is create a third-party trusted enforcement entity, right? And we call this copyleft artificial intelligence with trusted enforcement, or TEE. And this is kind of how our model works. Both AI models and AI training data sets are copyrightable things. You, as developers, could choose to attach what we call an ethical use license to it. Part of the magic of this ethical use license is it assigns all enforcement capabilities to this trusted entity. Now, as your copyrighted models and data sets are shared and evolve over time, all of those derivative works also have these licenses that also share or assign enforcement rights. So as their technology evolves, enforcement rights continue to get aggregated, and this entity gets more and more potent as something to compel compliance to these rules. And the idea is that inevitably there's going to be some model that's released, whether it is it's problematic from the start or as it evolves to new applications, some problem arises, whether, let's say it's bias. What this model allows is the potential to report, for users to report that problem, and for this enforcement entity to pass that information along to other users of those technologies that may be naive to that problem. The magic about licenses is they are really flexible. This is why I'm not really concerned right now about what the rules should be, more about the framework, because we can build whatever rules we want to some limits within this license framework. We could build a fast track recall system for dangerous models that we find in the wild. To a certain extent, it delves in the details. The great thing about this that really excites us is it takes the advantages of both of these models and combines them. It has the expertise, flexibility, the ability to adapt of soft law, and gives it the teeth of hard law. And one that becomes more effective the more people use it. Now, I'm trying to stay on time. I know I'm one of the last people, so I'm going to get right to the point here. I see AI as a really pressing social issue. It seems like many of you here do as well. I share skepticism that many of you have that governmental action in terms of AI regulations is uncertain. But my answer to our wonderful colleague who is no longer here, but has chosen to remain anonymous, who's going to do anything about it? My optimistic answer to that is you can, right? With this model, we don't need to wait for governments. We as developers, as academics, can work and incorporate this into our own AI management system. Much like we have open data policies, we can have open AI policies. Now I'm related to ChatGPT, all those folks. But I do think that given what we're seeing in the broader environment right now, we are looking at soft or soft-ish law approaches being likely the best near-term strategy to govern AI. I don't think we should wait on hard law. I just don't think it's going to come in time. And I do think, given many of the challenges of AI, that we're going to have to lean into policy innovations and not rely on some of the old policy tools that have proven ineffective in the past. So I think we need to build and do something more. Anyway, that's my presentation. Thank you for listening to my ranting, Ray.
Thank you. Any question? We can take one question here. Oh, a couple of questions.
Here, go ahead. From an organizational perspective, like trying to sell business leaders on, the legal ramifications of AI, what would you say is like, your top 3 points you should bring up to them?
Wow.
The 3 is too much. You can scale it down.
Gosh. So, I mean, that's tricky right now because we're in an environment where there's basically no regulation whatsoever. And, if I'm an attorney and I'm advising a client on legal risk, there's a situation where, do you remember this, this was probably 2015 or so, when there was this big movement for national privacy regulation. All these major tech firms were like, let's get national privacy legislation. One of the fears, we saw this in similar biotech regulation, was that you had industry leaders that started doing things that the public turned against. They no longer trusted those tech leaders to behave responsibly. And what you saw is a major consumer backlash against those technologies. It's one of the reasons why there's a lot of anti-GMO advertisement. It's all of that consumer backlash against this technology. Building responsible AI may not be a legal imperative, but from a business standpoint, it's one that may be existential, right? Because that consumer backlash could potentially really hurt AI firms and the trust the community has in them. A little bit rambling, sorry.
Do you have a problem with that?
Yeah, I had although I like your, it might be permissible but not forgivable. I had a question about the application of this on data sets. If there are multiple of these ethical use licensing on multiple data sets that are combined to create a model, you can't necessarily pick out, okay, this, this part comes from this data set and that part comes from the other. So what about if these licenses are conflicting with each other?
So that's an excellent question. That's an excellent question. The idea is that similar to the sort of framework that the community commons scheme has put together, where you have all these different iterations under sort of a common umbrella, and there's as few of those friction points as possible. That's likely what you would see. But you could also build into the license a rule set for choosing perhaps the strictest terms of the available license. This is pretty common in contracting. It's often called the battle of the forms. And there are ways of choosing which terms apply when two terms conflict. You can also deal with that by having terms within the license that specifically, this would be particularly important for training data, where there is or is not a permission to combine with other data, right? Where you are specifically addressing those types of issues within the license. So it doesn't completely remove any hypothetical situation where you do have that, but it helps minimize the chance of uncertainty, or it minimizes the chance of that happening. Thank you so much.
Hi everyone. It's a privilege to give the last presentation, and thank you for sitting with me. And today I'm going to talk about explanation generation and evaluation for large language models. So nowadays, when we talk about AI, one of the hottest topics is large language models, or LLMs. And these models have stumped the world with their abilities to understand and speak human language. And also, they can solve a wide range of applications. So, in fact, there are many discussions around LLMs, such as whether they may change the future of work and whether they do understand real-world knowledge. And big companies have been competing in developing large language models. And there are many commercial LLMs, such as Gemini from Google, OpenAI, ChatGPT from OpenAI, and Llama 3 from Meta, and DeepSeek, an open source model developed by a Chinese startup, and it shocked the world a few weeks ago because of its efficiency and performance as compared to closed source models. So what are large language models? They are neural language models built on the transformer architecture. And these models are usually stacked with multiple layers with millions and billions of parameters. And they are pre-trained on vast amounts of text data, so which enables them to understand human language and speak and generate human-like text. And these models also possess real-world knowledge and reasoning capabilities. So for example, if you ask the model the question like, why do people put food in the refrigerator? The model can understand the question and also provide a response justifying why refrigerators are used to keep food cool and fresh. In addition to the pure text-based large language models, people have already developed multimodal large language models. So these models can take multimodal inputs, including text, image, video, sensor, or audio information. So here's an example. So if you provide this image to the model and ask, what is a cat going to do? The model can understand the question and also understand the information in the image. So the model may answer that the cat is going to catch the mouse based on its common sense knowledge that mice are a natural source of food for cats. So these models have opened up new opportunities in real-world applications across various domains, such as medicine, law, politics, climate finance, geography, education, chemistry, etc. And in this talk, I will focus on the medical domain, but the conclusions and methods are generalized to other domains. So over the past years, many LLMs have been developed for medicine and healthcare, such as MapOn, MapAlpaca, and Meditron. And even general purpose LLMs have demonstrated impressive performance in the medical domain, such as GPT-4. And these models have the potential to assist doctors in medical tasks, such as disease diagnosing diseases, summarizing clinical reports, and making treatment plans. In particular, these models have passed the passing scores on the medical board exams. So the task is to answer medical questions. And here's an example of the medical question answering. So you can see that the input contains a case description, a question, and some answer choices. And the model needs to pick up an answer from these answer choices. So this process involves synthesizing the information in the input, applying the knowledge encoded in the model, and also reasoning over this information to infer the answer. So these large language models are suitable for this task because they were pre-trained on extensive medical text. So this figure shows the performance of LLMs over time on the MapQA benchmark. So MapQA is a benchmark with questions sourced from the United States medical licensing exams. And we can see that in the past year, many models have reached the passing score, and they are even approaching or exceeding the expert performance. So while the high accuracy on the medical benchmark is impressive, that doesn't mean that these models are able to handle realistic clinical cases, which are usually more complicated. And solving these realistic clinical cases usually require established knowledge and clinical experience. So there's a gap between the performance of these models on medical QA benchmarks, which are mostly rely on textbook knowledge, and versus the realistic clinical cases. Additionally, doctors usually need the explanations for complex clinical decisions. Here's an example of the medical explanation. So we can see that it explains all the answer choices, like why a specific answer is correct and why the others are incorrect. And without this explanation, the doctor may not even trust the model's prediction. So we claim that when we evaluate LMs, we should consider both of their predictions and explanations. But the problem is that there's no supportive benchmark. So existing medical benchmarks are either too easy or limited in space, in scope or scale, and they even do not require any complex reasoning. So the test would be as simple as summarizing a clinical report. More importantly, none of these existing benchmarks provide high-quality explanations that can be used to assess model explanations. So to fill this research gap, we propose a challenging medical QA benchmark. It contains two data sets, the JAMA Clinical Challenge and the MapBodies. And both data sets provide high-quality explanations written by human experts. The JAMA Clinical Challenge contains about 1,500 examples sourced from the JAMA network. And we collected data spanning the past decade and 13 medical domains. And these articles are summaries of real-world, real clinical cases. So they are even challenging for human doctors. And MapBodies is an online platform for medical study. And we collected about 300 examples. And we mainly focus on the USMLE step 2 and 3 type of questions because they are simulated clinical cases. So the existing benchmark, MapQA, also contains the USMLE type questions, but this benchmark does not provide any explanations. We evaluate 7 LMs, including both open source and closed source, and general purpose and medical specific models. On the 2 data sets and the previous benchmark, MapQA, so we can see that all the performance of all of these models drops significantly on our data sets. Particularly, GPT-4 drops more than 12%, and other models drop from 5% to 12%. And the smaller models like MapAlpaca and Meerkat drop significantly on the JAMA Clinical Challenge dataset. So this means that these models fall short in solving the realistic clinical challenge cases. And our datasets are more challenging than existing MapQA benchmark. So next, we explore whether prompting strategies can help improve the model's performance. And we apply 2 prompting strategies. The first one is called in-context learning. So for this prompting strategy, we insert some question answering examples in the prompt, and we hope that can help the model learn the text within the context. And the second prompt is called chain of thought prompting. So for this prompt, we prompt the model to apply the reasoning first and then generate an explanation based on the reasoning. And the chain of thought prompting has improved LM's performance in many other tests. However, the results are kind of negative, and we found that in-context learning actually cannot help improve this model's performance on our challenging benchmark. Only GPT-4 and Llama 3 benefit a little bit from in-context learning. So this means that these tests are new to these models, so that we definitely never seen these models during their these tests during their pre-training. So that's why the more in-context learning cannot help these models quickly adapt to these specific tests. The chain of thought prompting generally improves the performance of most models, even though the improvement is not that significant. It's less than 5% on MapQA and MapBodies. But for the JAMA Clinical Challenge dataset, it only improves GPT 3.5 and Meerkat a little bit. It doesn't help with other models. So this task is still challenging for these models, even we use more advanced prompting strategies. Okay, so next we evaluate model-generated explanations, and here's the prompt we use. So we directly provide the correct answer in the prompt, and then we ask the model to generate an explanation explaining why the answer is correct and the other choices are incorrect. So here's an example where we have the reference explanation written by human experts and the model-generated explanation. And we apply some evaluation metrics to evaluate model-generated explanation. So the first one is ROOCH-L. It's a metric measuring the surface form similarity between the reference explanation and the model-generated explanation based on their overlap. And we also apply the metrics to measure the semantic similarity between the two explanations. And the basic idea is to use a pre-trained model like BERT to encode these two explanations into two contextual embeddings. The two embeddings are high-dimensional vectors, and then we just measure the similarity between these two vectors. And we also apply some pre-trained models to conduct final grain evaluations. For example, we use CTC to measure the coherence, the consistency, relevance, and preservation of model-generated explanation. The consistency means the extent to which the explanation is consistent with the input. And the reference means whether it's relevant to the question, and preservation measures the information alignment between the reference explanation and model-generated explanation. And similarly, GEVO, it uses more advanced LM, the GPT-4 model, to evaluate the model-generated explanation in different dimensions like coherence, consistency, and relevance. And we also recruited medical professionals to conduct human evaluation. And we evaluate the completeness, correctness, and relevance of these explanations. So completeness means the extent to which the explanation explains all the answer choices. And the correctness means whether the information in the explanation is correct or not. And the relevance means whether it's relevant to the question. And then we measure the correlation between all of these automatic metrics and human evaluation. So the result is still negative. There's little to no correlation between the automatic metrics and the human judgments. So only GEVO demonstrates a little bit positive correlation with human evaluation, but it's not strong enough. So the results indicate that all these existing automatic metrics cannot replace human evaluations. And our human annotators also identify the deficiencies of explanations, such as incorrect and irrelevant information, like this example shows. So at the first glance, the model-generated explanation looks plausibly good. And without any background knowledge, we just trust it. But the problem is that the model may hallucinate. So there's a lot of misinformation or irrelevant information in the model-generated explanation. So for now, the model-generated explanations are not trustworthy or reliable in practical use. And considering the cost of conducting human evaluation, there's a pressing need to develop automatic metrics. And in our recent works, we have developed information theoretic metrics, which can measure the useful information in model-generated explanations. And in our recent work, we also developed a comprehensive metric to measure the multimodal train of thought explanations. For this metric, we measure both the description and reasoning parts in the explanation, and we can measure the explanation in different aspects, such as the correctness, correlation, and the informativeness, etc. I probably do not have time to go into details, and if you are interested in these metrics, please feel free to check out our papers. But I still want to emphasize that automatic evaluation is very challenging, and we still need more comprehensive and final grade metrics that can align with human judgments or replace human judgments. And developing these metrics require domain experts and knowledge, so it's usually quite expensive. And we need to consider the robustness and fairness of applying these metrics for evaluating model-generated explanations. So finally, in our future work, we aim to develop more challenging benchmarks that can simulate real-world tests across different domains, not just medicine. And we will also develop domain-specific LMs or multimodal LMs for these challenging tests. And also, we will develop explainable AI techniques that can provide trustworthy and reliable explanations. And also, we need to develop automatic metrics that can align with human evaluations for model explanations. Okay, so yeah, so this concludes my talk. And thank you for your attention. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. I think we can take 1 or 2 questions from here. Any questions?
Thank you for a really great presentation. A question about these advanced tests that you had your LLM group, whereby you brought in some experts to kind of develop, to look at the answers. Did you compare, for example, you scored these LLMs for these tasks and you noticed a reduction, a deterioration in the quality of the answers? Did you try to bring in a pool of average doctors, 8 people, and see how they would answer these? How would they score relative to the LLMs? I think that would be. I understand you bring in the experts who know their stuff, but how about you bring, the person around the corner? I go and ask them a question. How would they come up relative to that?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. So in our human evaluation, because we try to rely on these human annotators, like as our ground truth annotator. So that's why we only consider medical professionals. And I do agree that it would be very interesting to compare the model's performance with average doctors, because actually I don't know whether we can find these average doctors. But we do, I think we can actually recruit maybe some medical trainees or medical students and then compare with these LMs. Yeah, I think, at least for doctors, I think they are professional enough. And I don't think we can find any average doctors. It's very tricky. Yeah, but thank you for your question.